All right, so today we are going to look at Congress. All right, so just to refresh your memory, right, Federalist number 51 by Madison. The best quote ever: "If men were angels, no government would be necessary." So this is the paper that he outlines the separation of powers, how it's going to work, how none will have too much power over the other, and we will not be able to have any branch become tyrannical over the country. So separation of powers, balances, that the republic, right, a Republican government is going to serve as the check on factions. All right, and we're going to divide this power into multiple stakeholders. All right, what you need to know is that there's 5 roles of Congress. One role, right, their job is to make laws. I mean, that's what they're supposed to do. They don't so much do that anymore, but that's one of their main jobs, making laws. The next is to represent the people, ideally all of the people in their district or state, but representing the people is the next job. They're also to perform oversight, right? We'll go over this, but the idea is that they're checking on different bureaucratic entities, executive functions, things like that, just making sure things are going as they should be and laws are being executed as they were intended. Next is to help constituents, right? So if you are in a situation, right, you can send a message, email, phone call, reach out to your congressperson, and ideally, right, speak to them maybe about healthcare, speak to them about unemployment, speak to them about things like that, and then hopefully maybe your congressperson will listen to you and take up the cause and kind of fight for what you need. All right, next is educate the public. This may be more idealized than actually practiced today, but it was something that was the hope of Congress that they would continue to do. I don't know. You decide for yourself if they still do it. All right, so let's look at it. There's something called the incumbency, right? The sitting person in office, right? And their advantage in an election is that they get to claim some credit, right? Some things took place, some laws got passed, some policies were made, and they were part of it. They get to travel home, see their constituents. They can provide help to individual constituents, all right? And then they can use the systems in front of them, such as mail and now technology, to reach out to people. Okay. So the idea is they have a resume. Constituents can look at them and be like, hey, you've been doing a great job. I like you. Let's just keep you in there. Okay. All right. So the advantage, okay, is that they portray themselves a certain way, right? They can take partisan stands and still be okay. All right. And most opponents who go after an incumbent can be viewed at as inexperienced because perhaps they've never worked in politics before. Okay. Most opponents can appear unorganized and sometimes be underfunded. It kind of depends. We've definitely had some challenges to that in recent elections. Okay, so incumbency in the House and the Senate. The House has a higher rate of re-election than the Senate. We do tend to fire them after some of their first terms. 6 years, we say get out. But the House does typically have more incumbency. That trend is still there. House members do serve in small, often safe districts. Okay, and this is because of something called gerrymandering, right? The carving up of a district to serve a party. Okay. House members, remember, serve 2 years and run for re-election almost all the time. So the minute they win, they go really fast to make a resume, and then they're already running for re-election before you know it. So sometimes incumbents do actually lose. Incumbents can become involved in a scandal, maybe when the district gets recarved out after a census. Their seat is no longer in the majority party that they're a member of, and it switches. Okay. It can become competitive in that way. All right. Or maybe people just hate them and people are like, hey, they never listen to us. We should just get them out of there. So a lot of times anymore, that's why we see incumbents Lose is that the sentiments and hopes of the constituents have shifted. That person no longer represents them. So the new face that's coming in does. And so they're the ones that win. So some things you need to remember is that redistricting means changing the district boundaries so that population groups are even. Okay. This is all based on the census. All right. Which means that a state could gain or lose seats in the House. Okay. That is called reapportionment. We are reapportioning the numbers of House of Representatives seats. Okay. Now there's also something called district cracking. So the district can be cracked where a line is drawn to divide a group, or it can be packed where a group is put into a single district. Oftentimes this is done on economic or racial basis. All right, so just the basics. Okay, we are bicameral. We have 435 members in the House. They serve 2 years. All revenue bills must start in the House, okay, so which means they have a lot more influence on the budget. So every time you say, I hate taxes or I hate the budget, you need to know who your House member is because it lies on them, okay? The Senate, 100 members, 2 per state. They get 6-year terms. They're more influential because they get to affirm the president's appointments into cabinet positions, okay? They also have something called a filibuster, which is an unlimited debate. So let's look at leadership. The House is led by somebody called the Speaker of the House. They are elected by all House members. The major role in committee assignments and legislation is chosen by the Speaker of the House, okay? And the majority party gets the committee chair seats, okay? There is a majority leader, a minority leader, right? And the majority and minority each have whips, okay? The Senate, right, is officially led by the Vice President, okay? So if there's a tie, the Vice President will come in and break the tie. Otherwise, that's kind of the only role of the Vice President. They're really only there to certify the electoral votes every 4 years or to break a tie. The majority leader is really the leader of the Senate and is the most powerful person in the Senate. And then there is going to be a counter to that, which is the minority leader, the second most powerful person in the Senate. Okay. So remember that the House initiates all revenue bills. They are the ones that issue the articles of impeachment, right? So they're the ones that vote and say, yes, we're going to file charges. All right. And they select the president if there is no winner in the Electoral College. The Senate, okay, they confirm cabinet appointments, they confirm judges, they ratify treaties, and they are the ones that hold the impeachment hearings. And to be found guilty of impeachment, there is a 2/3 vote needed to convict. All right. So remember that the filibuster basically is the ability in the Senate, and only the Senate, that one senator can talk like forever. And you need 60 votes. Remember, there's 100 senators. So you need 60 votes for something called cloture to end a filibuster. Doesn't happen often. Usually the filibuster just runs out and they finally just stop talking. All right. So oversight hearings, super important part of what Congress does. So members of Congress hold these hearings, usually looking at bureaucracy or private individuals, and they're looking at what's going on. Are they being held accountable? Is there kind of a free-for-all going on? Are the laws that Congress passed that the bureaucracy has to enforce being enforced as the law was intended? Some of the hearings sometimes take place like against Facebook, right? Are they a monopoly? Are they not a monopoly? Are they selling people's privacy and ignoring it? Like things like that, things that they look into. Is the Department of Homeland Security doing what they're supposed to be doing with the border? They investigate all those types of things. All right. So committees, the House Rules Committee. So in the House of Representatives, there's something called the House Rules Committee. They set the rules for amendment and debate. So they're pretty powerful. Okay. But then there's also something called Committee of the Whole. And what this is that the entire House of Representatives will then meet to consider a bill. Okay. So the House Rules Committee sets the rules for debate. So how long you can talk, how long the debate's going to go on, how many amendments are allowed, if any, etc. The Committee of the Whole is when the entire House of Representatives meets to consider a bill. So let's look at how that happens. So the committee chair, the chair is the most important position for controlling legislation, okay, in the side of the committee. And this is appointed by whoever holds the majority party in the House. Seniority on the committee is a general rule. That's kind of what they look at. Members can choose the chair of their committee with influence, but the majority party gets the chairman. Okay. Committee numbers are going to reflect the percentage of Democrats and Republicans in the body. So if there's more Democrats, they'll have a few more members on the committee than Republicans, and vice versa. Okay. So there's something called discharge a petition, and this is used to bring a bill to the whole House or Senate without a report by a committee. All right. This is usually used to bypass a committee, all right, who's been refusing to consider the bill or is stalling it. So for a bill to ever make it to the floor, either in the Senate or the House, to be debated on and voted on, it has to pass through a committee first. Okay? All right. So there's something called a caucus inside of Congress. All right. These are smaller group members who share similar interests and characteristics. They usually pressure committee meetings, and they like to have hearings for votes on bills. Caucuses can sometimes be more effective than lobbyists. It kind of depends on the power of the caucus. Okay, so caucuses are a regrouping of smaller members within Congress. Okay, they typically pressure committee meetings and hearings for votes on bills if they really want something to get to the floor. All right, so they're pretty powerful inside of that. So just a really quick look at how a bill becomes a law. Remember, anybody can draft a bill. You can go draft a bill if you wanted, but only a member of Congress can introduce it. Okay, there's a lot of rules in the House about this, more than in the Senate. Party leaders play vital roles in steering bills through both houses, which committee they go in, how many rules they're going to set on debate and amendments, etc. All right. And then also interest groups and caucuses, even the president. All right. All these people have influence in the process. So something to remember. Okay. All right. Inside of passing bills, there's something called pork barrel, all right, or earmarking. Okay, so pork barrel is legislation that benefits a district, okay, and it helps members of Congress get reelected because they can always say, hey, remember how I got that thing for my district? Guys, don't you love it? You should get me back into office. Earmarks are going to be provisions benefiting a small group. Okay, so there's a small difference in there. All right, something called log rolling. This is practiced. The idea is that you're exchanging votes for favors. Don't get too crazy in your thoughts. The idea is like, I'll vote for your bill if you vote for mine. Or sometimes it can be, I will not come to the floor for that vote if you don't come to the floor for the vote on my bill. So you're kind of exchanging votes in some way. But that's all log rolling is. All right, so here we go. When representing your constituents, there's a couple of different rules here. One is as a delegate, right? You are elected to carry out your constituents' wishes. So, you know what? If your constituents want you to vote for healthcare and you are opposed to the healthcare, at some point, maybe you listen to your constituents and you become a delegate so that you fulfill what they want. Or you could be a trustee, which is, you were elected to use your experience to make independent decisions. So you say, you know what, I know more about this topic, so this is how I'm going to vote, and my constituents will just be okay with it. Or there's the idea of the politico, okay, which is that you are a politician, you want to get reelected, so you carry out your party goals. You fulfill what the R or the D wants you to do so that you can get money, endorsements, etc., and get reelected again. So these are the three kind of things they think about before they vote, and how they're going to act. So remember separation of powers. Remember Federalist 51. Remember the Madisonian model. Okay, so remember that the legislative branch is and was created to be a pretty powerful branch of government. Okay, but the president does have some say here. Okay, they have some resources, and some of them is they can use something called the bully pulpit, which is the idea is that they use their position and their power to speak out on issues, all right, to persuade people to call into their Congress people or to just speak directly to Congress through different media outlets and say, this is what they need to be doing, and they need to complete that. Or sometimes it's promising electoral support, right? Maybe we're of the same party. you're disagreeing with me, well, I might not support you and speak on your behalf when you run for re-election. So those are some pretty big powers that the president has over different members of Congress. And then, of course, right, president can always threaten to veto legislation. He knows or she knows what's going through Congress, and they can come out and say, you know what, if this bill comes through, it doesn't matter if it hits my desk. I'm not voting for it. I'm going to veto it. And that holds a lot of sway. All right, so get this stuff into your notes. All right, update your vocabulary. And until next time.